Yo ho ho! How you doing? That was very pirate-like. I didn't intend to say yo ho ho in that fashion, and then found myself wanting to follow that up with a bottle full of rum. That wouldn't be good, would it? Morning, you lucky people. 2 days in a row. It won't last. No, I wanted to. I was just thinking after yesterday's meandering thoughts about how to structure better what I talk about, and so I had a bit of a delve into the Obsidian Vault and a bit of a look, and came up with some ideas. But while I was just doing that and flicking through my calendar, I noticed that I'd popped in my calendar a web link. Um, Clearly something that I felt I needed to go back to. So I opened the web link, and it reminded me that this was one of the very things that I decided I was going to talk to you about. Because at the weekend, when I was away, I read in The Guardian a great article by Anna Schaffner. She had a book out, it's always the way people write an article in The Guardian when they've got a book out. I wonder if I can maybe do that at some point. But it's a great article, and as I was reading it, it just made me think that here, and it's all recycled stuff. This, isn't it? I was talking yesterday to somebody about the fact that we feel as though we're coming up with new ideas. And you'll see as I go through this that we're not. We think we're coming up with new ideas, but really ancient wisdom, things that people were talking about. I'm not going to bleat on about the bloody ancient Greeks, but I am. Things that people were talking about thousands of years ago. People were talking about then about how to live a good life and what a good life was, and kind of how to manage things about us to kind of make life a bit better. Now, life was very different in ancient Greece, but it turns out that we're pretty much the same animal. Anyway, Schaffner, and you can go and read it. I'll share the link, but I'm going to tell you most about it here. It's the old adage. I'll do the reading, so you don't have to. Schaffner it opened by talking about burnout and being exhausted, and I was minded of that meme that keeps coming up with what is it? I'm not a morning lark. I'm not a night owl. I'm a permanently exhausted pigeon, which always makes me chortle. Not in a good way. It's not good if you feel like an exhausted pigeon. But my question is, if you feel like a permanently exhausted pigeon, what are you doing about it? And Schaffner's got the answer, and the answers are in some of the things that pulling together some of the things that I talk on here kind of regularly about. So anyway, she was talking about the chances of burnout in some study by the O.C. Tanner Institute, who she referenced, 2019 study. So Dean knows what it's like now. Here we are 5 years down the line. That one of the things was about appreciation at work. And if we neither give, and this is the interesting bit, nor receive appreciation at work, so there's something really positive about giving appreciation to other people, our chances of burnout increase by close on 50%, 45 to 48%, close on 50%, and about more than 1 in 2 chance of burning out. And then she referenced the Deloitte Wellbeing Survey, I'm pronouncing that right, from 2023, so a bit more contemporary, that half of the UK and US workforce, so it fits, declares it is always or often exhausted or stressed. And I was up with Trevor yesterday having a massage, and I was talking to him about how even though I do a lot of stuff, I always feel tired as well. You know what I mean? And I remember going to the doctors a few years back and telling him this, and he said, "Well, welcome to the real world, or welcome to the modern world." And I was like, "Well, that's fine, but that's not good enough, really, because we shouldn't be tired all the time." So anyway, Schaffner talks about a few things which I found really interesting. So I'm going to pick them up one at a time, give them a minute or so each, and then we're done for the day. And there's some great things in here. So hang on for these kind of things. and some good things towards the end. So she says, take up a hobby. This is really interesting. So she also talks about rest, prioritizing rest later on in the article. But she starts by saying, take up a hobby. And one of the things that I talk about when I'm talking about well-being and self-care is the fact that rest isn't necessarily the absence of activity, but rest is actually the movement of our thoughts, the movement of our actions to something that takes our thoughts away from the thing that's causing us to be exhausted, if that makes sense. So taking up a hobby is a real kind of, antidote is the word Schaffner uses, antidote to exhaustion, because it makes sure that we got other things to focus on, but it also takes our mind away from and off other things. So I think that's really important. So if you don't have any hobbies, then it ends up just being all about the graft, the grind, doesn't it? And I don't just mean work. I mean, like the graft and the grind of home life. If you don't have hobbies, if you don't have something that takes you out of work and the parts of home life, which I would consider work, then what have you got in terms of where you get your recovery from, where you re-energize? So take a hobby that is really important. Managing your inner critic, she says, really important. We tell ourselves negative, hostile things all the time about our lack of success, our failure even. Maybe we use that word about ourselves, and I'm as guilty as anybody about that. When the wheels have come off certain aspects of life. So managing your inner critic is really important. I mean, take the England football team, to be contemporary, to be very current. They win their group, albeit not like not with the skill and aplomb we would have hoped for. We would have hoped for a Spain type 9-point victory, but they win their group, and there's criticism. Now I hope those guys are managing their inner critic and saying, well, okay, we might not have played as well as we'd hoped, but we played well enough to win the group. A win and 2 draws. That's fine. That's acceptable. That's more than acceptable. So they haven't lost a game. But if that inner critic takes hold, then you feel drained of energy because you're telling yourself negative messages all the time. So it's important to tell ourselves positive messages, and I hope those England guys are doing that. I hope they're saying, look, we achieved this this feat of getting out the group stages and what have you. So anyway, so there's that. Managing your inner critic, really important. And this I really like, and I dragged this off the shelf. I've only ever tiptoed into this. I've never read the whole thing, because she references this guy, Henry Thoreau, and this is 2 books of his. And Civil Disobedience is quite a short one, but Walden is his book about his journey in the 1840s. He hikes into Walden Wood, and the story goes, builds himself a hut, lives alone for 2 years, and in that book he develops this idea of life cost, and life cost is the amount of time, energy, health, mental well-being that we sacrifice in order to achieve our aims and objectives. And many of us, myself included for a large part of my life, but not so much now. And it is just not so much because we live in this capitalist consumerist world. You've heard me go on about this before. We sacrifice time and energy and health and our mental and physical well-being, many of us, to acquire money, to accumulate possessions that we don't need. We work hard to generate cash and capital that we then spend on things, and we give it back to the people who are employing lots of us to make things. Or maybe we chase status. And we give up our time, we give up our energy, and we sell our well-being to have the next qualification, or have some more money in the bank, or whatever it happens to be. We pay the life cost, as Theroux would say, doing that. So we have to be very careful about what we focus our attention on. Very careful about what we focus our aim on. What are we targeting? And one of the things that she goes on to say, and I think this is really important, because sometimes when it comes to this life cost thing, sometimes these things get chosen for us, don't they? You know what I mean? Family, friends, colleagues, work, role. I watch social workers qualify, and immediately it's like, oh well, I need to do my supported year in employment, so I need to do that, and then the next thing I'll do is this, and the next thing I'll do is that, and then I'll qualify as a practice educator, or I'll become a mental health practitioner. I'll do this, and I'll do that, and those things are fine. Those things are absolutely fine if they are your priorities. If they're your priorities, then they're fine. If it meets with your why, then that's absolutely fine. Do those things without a shadow of a doubt. But if you're just doing them because it's the thing that's expected of you, well, there's a cost to that. There's a life cost to that. So think carefully about what it is you aim at. So that is the next thing, which is learn to say no. And I'll do a thing on learn to say no, because I do an hour-long presentation on how to say no, and why we find it really difficult to say no. We find it difficult to say no because it's much easier to say yes, and then worry about how we do the thing we said yes to later on. Because saying no gets the person out your face who's asking you to do something. So you just say yes. Sorry, saying yes gets the person out your face. Whereas when you say no, you've then got to give some explanation. You've then got to justify yourself, all those kind of things. Well, maybe you don't have to justify yourself. Sometimes you do at work. I get that. So back to Schaffner. She suggests applying the 80-20 principle. This is really interesting, and I tussle with the 80-20 principle because I can get it to work sometimes, and sometimes I can't. But anyway, this was Vilfredo Pareto created this Pareto law, the 80-20 principle, because he spotted that 80% of wealth. This was how he first came up with this idea. 80% of wealth was in the possession of 20% of the population. Well, the ratio is probably worse than that now, but it also crops up in other places when you start to look for it. It's this kind of underlying principle of how the world seems to work, and what you will find if you look at it is 20% of your activities often yield 80% of the benefit. So very little of what we do actually creates benefit for us, actually yields those important results, because we do a lot of fluff and a lot of guff around it. But if you break it down, the things that actually change and transform your life and your world and your attitude and your approach are actually only a small part of what we do. So if you can focus on that 20%, and I suppose increase that 20%, or only achieve that 20%, and that's sufficient, then you do better. Let's get rid of the guff. You know what I mean? So she talks about the 80-20 principle, and finally, really important, and it's nice to see. I mean, everybody's talking about the Stoics these days. Has everybody always been talking about the Stoics? She talks about the circle of control, and I talk a lot about looking at things through the lens of control. It's not my thing; it's a Stoic thing. And she talks about the circle of control. So you draw two concentric circles. The outer one is what you can't control, and the inner circle is what you can control. And the Stoics would suggest that we focus on the inner circle. We focus on what we can control and just accept what we can't control. We just have to get on and do it. And she quotes Marcus Aurelius, which is really nice, which is, only a madman looks for figs in winter. It's true, because there won't be any figs. Yet we search for things, don't we? Strive for things that just aren't there, or we've been convinced that they're there in things, but they're not. So think about the circle of control, and that's one of the things. That's an exercise I get or try to get people to do on a daily basis. Think about things through the lens of control. Could you have controlled things that didn't go very well any better? Probably find you couldn't have, because they were outside of your control. If you could have controlled them better, happy days, you learned something from that. But then think about what went well, you know. Think about what went well and finish with that. Um, the Stoic idea being focus on what you can control, not what you can't, for a happier life. So that was you can go and read it in the Guardian. It was Saturday, I think, and Anna Schaffner's got a book out which looks into all this kind of stuff. But that's what she had to say in the article. So it's good. So take up a hobby, manage your inner critic, work out your life cost. How much are these things costing you in terms of your well-being in your life? Learn to say no. Apply the 80-20 principle, prioritize rest, and be more like a Stoic. And just worry about the stuff that you can control and control it. That's the secret. You've got to apply yourself and make sure you're controlling everything you can, and then just accept the stuff you can't control and just get on with it. You know, which is what you got to do. So there you go. Nice to talk to you. And well, you never know. I might see you tomorrow again. Who knows? But there you go. That's enough for today. Take care. Have good days.